This week on The Buzz, saving Yoda from extinction, and Texas Chainsaw Master Tobe Hooper. If you touch that zapper, you'll answer to him.
This week, Hollywood pays tribute to famous monsters of Filmland magazine, recreating the original prototypes of the Star Wars characters. Star Trek writer and award-winning novelist David Gerrold, and buzzing with the movie's master of slice and dice, Tobe Hooper.
Hey Buzz boys and girls, Mike Jarek here with our good friend Mario Chiodo here at Elusive Concepts in Northern California. We were here last week. We had so much fun we wanted to come back.
Great.
Is that okay?
Oh,
we're not intruding?
No, not at all.
This guy designed some wonderful Halloween masks that we saw last week, but I want to learn about something new called a maquette. What is it?
A maquette is actually a recreation of the original concept artwork that was used in movies that would eventually become the actual character.
So what happened to the original
Well,
concept?
most of it was either destroyed or is deteriorating, and we had to go back, for example, on Yoda and piece together the remaining fragments at Lucasfilms, which was a very painstaking task. But we eventually got to the final product in every minute detail, all the way down to the warts.
Use a lot of pictures, I suppose?
A lot of pictures, a lot of drawings.
Yeah. What's the first step?
First step is we begin with a clay model of the item. You can see Jim's doing another Star Wars character called Ninyum, if you can say that right. Ninyum from The Empire Strikes Back.
Can I add something here? How about a big wart or something right there?
Right over here.
All right. Oh, right there? Okay, sorry. Yee. Oh, look at this. That dude's from Star Trek, right?
Right, this is our first Star Trek maquette, and he is a Telosian from the original pilot.
He's so vain. So you're working off a picture here.
Right.
Look at that. Nice work. Pretty close. Adjust the nose slightly, though. How about this tubbo?
And this is Jabba the Hutt, and he also is a recreation of the original concept artwork that Yoda was done the same way.
Who would buy this stuff?
Collectors, sci-fi collectors, are really into this.
Yeah. Yoda is my favorite.
It has the biggest mass appeal.
Oh, I'm like everybody else. He started off in clay, though.
That's correct, using whatever fragments were left at Lucasfilms, because the original does not exist because of the material it was made out of. It was very, very fragile and deteriorated.
So what would be the next step for him?
I'll show you.
How eerie. Yoda without ears.
Yes, this is actually the first step out of the mold without his ears, hands, or feet, and then they're glued in separately. And it comes to the next stage, which is the painting. And the painting is done in a very complicated fashion. It's both airbrushed, sponged, and hand-painted with a brush.
And how about the hair, Mr. Hair?
The hair is delicately glued in, and it's the actual goat hair that was used on the original Yoda.
Oh my gosh. And then you wrap Yoda.
Well, with the, again, the authentic clothing that he wore in the movies. So in every way, it's exactly as the original.
Now, I hear people are clamoring for Yoda.
Yeah, they come off the shelves as fast as they're put on, and there is only a limited run of these items.
How much are they?
They're about $450.
Hello. So what's the best place to get them?
Right now, one of the best places is Spencer Gifts. There's very limited distribution of this product.
Yeah, and Spencer is all over the country?
All over the country, most of the major malls.
Is Yoda a boy or a girl?
That's the big joke in the studio that nobody knows what it is, and everyone says it's a Pat.
Oh, like, yeah, Pat?
That's
really a Pat answer.
This is Steve Wake from Lakewood, Colorado. I was calling to recommend the Battlestar Galactica comic that is now being published by Maximum Press. The artwork is incredible, and the story basically ignores what has happened in Galactica 80 and is continuing from the end of the series as we saw it in its original form, with Adama still in command and Apollo and Starbuck still around. It's a beautiful comic, and it should be a continuing series from now on.
We are here at the Son of Famous Monsters World Festival Convention. A tribute to Forey Ackerman and his amazing magazine.
Famous Monsters of Filmland, the classic horror magazine of our time, was recently saluted with a monster of a convention in Universal City, California. The event was titled Son of Famous Monsters of Filmland because it marks the second gathering to honor the magazine. This convention's man of the hour, or should we say weekend, was the magazine's founder, Forrest Ackerman. Ackerman, whose readers spanned several generations, was frightfully delighted to meet his numerous fans at the con.
They tell me I made their childhood, and they grew up with the magazine. I said, oh, no, no, you're not supposed to grow up. You know, we started it for 11-and-a-half-year-old kids who wanted to laugh and learn something about monsters and sci-fi and fantasy and so on.
Many of those kids that were influenced by the magazine are now making their own significant contributions to the horror and sci-fi genres. And some, like director John Landis, turned up the con to pay their respects to Ackerman and their favorite childhood reading material.
Famous Monsters was an interesting magazine, especially for a young kid, because it didn't just have articles on actors. It had articles on makeup men, directors, producers, Ray Harryhausen, animators, and so it was more about the actual filmmaking than most magazines.
The guys and ghouls who turned out for this convention were definitely into the subject matter. Some perhaps a little too much. Trust me, this guy has tattoos on parts of his body you don't need to see. And the many celebrities connected with the world of fantasy seem to enjoy meeting their fans.
It's a lot of fun, pleasant. I like people. I might even get to like you.
Well, maybe Al Lewis isn't the best example.
It's special because we're all crazy, and we collect together because the world doesn't care about the things we care about, and if the rest of the world doesn't care, to hell with them.
Well, you would expect to see famous folks like Ray Bradbury or Ray Harryhausen at this convention. There were also some surprises among the crowd.
Boris Karloff was my favorite actor when I was a kid. I loved the genre, mystery and horror and science fiction, as a lot of kids do. And when I was first started high school, I produced for a short time a horror magazine called Shudder Magazine for the neighborhood kids. And so that was actually my first magazine.
For many, the highlight of the convention was the famous Monsters of Filmland Museum, which displayed perhaps the greatest collection of fantasy film props and memorabilia ever seen under one roof. Collector Bill Malone showed off some original artifacts from the set of the sci-fi classic Forbidden Planet.
And this is part of the Krell lab as well, which is the what they call a Krell power panel. And then this is like stuff from the spaceship. I think it's interesting here. Let me show you the back of this. You can see the level of work involved. I mean, this would take somebody a long time to make this stuff.
Other unnatural highlights of the museum included this little guy from The Day the Earth Stood Still, original models from King Kong, display busts of some of our favorite fiends, and the original robot from Lost in Space. The Son of Famous Monsters of Filmland convention proved to be a huge hit with fans from as far away as Japan, as well as the celebrities who showed up to do some meeting and greeting. Now let's hope that the son of the Son of Famous Monsters of Filmland convention isn't far behind. After this disconnect, the Sultan of Splatter, Tobe Hooper. Masterminded by director Tobe Hooper, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its famous fiend Leatherface have become a horror legend. And while Texas Chainsaw Massacre has undoubtedly etched Hooper a spot in horror history, the director's other fright films bear a look as well. In fact, it seems that Hooper has always had an eye for the macabre.
I made my first film. I shot my first footage when I was 3 years old, and made a little film about my cousins being run over by a train.
This year, Hooper was back wreaking havoc on the big screen with the horror thriller The Mangler, now out on home video.
It's about a laundry machine that has a demon in it. The machine has a way of finding what it needs. And on this particular day, it has an agenda. It is the day set in its history for something to happen.
Since the release of Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974, Hooper has amassed quite the horror film resume. And in 1986, he crossed over into the sci-fi genre with a remake of one of his favorite films, Invaders from Mars.
It's okay, we're the police. We're here to help.
I loved Invaders from Mars. I loved the relentless quality, the relentless drive that it had. I mean, it's a young person on a treadmill, you know, running in slow motion. It tapped into things that were in the dreams.
Life Force, the story of vampires from outer space invading London, put a fun twist on the blood-sucking creature legend. Still, the film was met with lukewarm response from both audiences and critics when it was released in 1985. Hooper blames the studio, who thought his original cut was too long, for destroying his vision.
The first 5 or 6 minutes was cut out, and that was the springboard in which to view and reference the film. You weren't watching it in the reference or in the frame that was intended.
In 1982, Hooper teamed up with Steven Spielberg to create one of the most frightening ghost stories of all time, Poltergeist. While Stephen King was originally pegged to write the Poltergeist screenplay, only to drop out later, it was Spielberg himself who actually ended up writing most of the script. And there have been the constant rumors over the years that Spielberg ended up directing most of Poltergeist as well.
No, that's false. Stephen is a very strong producer. I would say like David O. Selznick, you know, and Stephen ended up writing the screenplay and would send blue pages, pink pages, and I would have the opportunity to reshoot a scene if I wanted to, or if he wanted me to, because he's a very strong producer with very specific opinions, and it was my first big special effects film.
Despite Hooper's great body of work, the one film that even he admits he'll probably be remembered for is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And while that film was inspired by a true story, the idea of the chainsaw was all Hooper's.
Around holiday season, I was in a department store, and I hate holiday shopping, and the people were crowding in and such, and I was in the hardware department and looked down and I saw a rack of chainsaws displayed, and it just occurred to me how to get out of this crowd.
With films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and now The Mangler, you can safely bet that director Tobe Hooper is one horror master who has definitely made the cut.
Welcome back, everybody. Oh, yes, I'm back here in Sci-Fi Central, just checking out the state-of-the-art amusements coming our way next summer. This is going to be fabulous. At Paramount's King's Dominion in Richmond, Virginia, they are building the Outer Limits coaster ride. Check it out. It's an upside-down, 7-story thrill ride that will take place in complete darkness. Ooh, scary. The Outer Limits ride opens next April, and executives at Paramount's King's Dominion claim they were inspired to build the ride after they found strange UFO-related patterns in a field adjacent to the park. Now, remember that saying, if you build it, they will come? This is a case of they came, so let's build it. Check out another one. Sega Enterprises will build its first major interactive entertainment center here in the U.S. in downtown Seattle. Sega centers that include interactive roller coaster simulations, video bumper cars, and virtual reality plane rides are booming in Japan. Now, Sega is building them throughout the Far East and Europe as well. And that Seattle complex will be the first of 150 they have planned throughout North America.
Popular sci-fi author and Star Trek scriptwriter David Gerrold, after this illuminating interval.
Hey Buzzers, got a great story for you here. David Gerrold, struggling college student back in 1967. He was a writer and he sold his very first script unsolicited to the original Star Trek series. The name of his script? The Trouble with Tribbles. It became a classic. He went on to write science fiction for years and years. A great start. Hey, Dave, the trouble with tribbles is you shouldn't be using tribbles for trivial tidings.
I loved Star Trek. The original Star Trek was a great adventure. It was a wonderful place to play. There were great people there. It was a very special time. At that time, it wasn't this big hit. It wasn't a phenomenon. It wasn't a franchise. It was this little second-rate show that probably was going to get canceled, and nobody really understood what it was except those of us who were in on the secret.
The Trouble with Tribbles may have gotten him some early attention from the television industry, but it's the nearly 30 novels he's written since then that have firmly established David Gerrold as a popular and respected science fiction writer.
I want my readers to walk away from my books feeling two emotions. I want them feeling satisfied, and I want them feeling that they want more. It's kind of like eating chocolate. You know, you have a piece of chocolate, you say, that was good, I think I'll have some more. I'd like to be the chocolate of science fiction.
Fans of Mr. Gerrold have found his works habit-forming. A big reason for the reader loyalty seems to be Gerrold's ability to write about a wide range of sci-fi subjects. Experience has taught him that success lies in writing about what interests him.
In the early days, I was writing a lot of stuff I didn't like reading. And one day I realized I don't like reading this. A lot of my short stories I hated. And then one day I realized, why don't I write the stuff I would most like to read? I think my writing is better when I'm writing the stuff I enjoy reading because I know I'm satisfying at least one customer.
Growing up in Los Angeles in the 1950s, Gerrold had a fertile imagination and a voracious appetite for reading fantastic stories. Legendary author Robert Heinlein was a personal favorite.
I think science fiction writing is the it's just the most exciting area to work. You can write about anything you want. You get to write about the human condition. It's what attracted me to science fiction is, as a reader, I was like 9 years old when I discovered my first Heinlein juvenile, rocket ship Galileo. And then I discovered Between Planets and Red Planet. I think you could blame Heinlein for just steering my entire life in this direction.
A profound change occurred in Gerrold's life a few years ago when he decided to adopt a son. Bringing a child into his world not only altered his day-to-day routine, it transformed the content in many of his stories.
In terms of my writing, I'm writing a lot less adventure and a lot more what they call sensitive stories. And there's a lot more positive stuff in my stories than, I mean, I always thought my stories were positive before, but I found that that wasn't the way the readers perceived them. But then I wrote The Martian Child, which is a very upbeat and uplifting story, and people are perceiving it as a breakthrough story.
The Martian Child, loosely based on Gerrold's evolving relationship with his son, recently won a Hugo Award for Best Novelette. The author's stubborn desire to write about subjects that appeal to him has enabled him to draw countless readers into his imaginative world.
I've worked on TV shows, and I've had people say, and sometimes when they didn't know I was listening, say, oh, David, you know, David isn't from this planet. He's just reporting back. And I think, good, I got my job done. You know, I tell people I don't live here, I'm from the future, I'm just reporting. And some people get it and other people think I'm weird. So I've had people telling me I'm weird all my life. I might as well enjoy it.
On this week's Cutting Edge, we make contact with the future, a world of video computer phones.
I want to take you out to dinner tonight.
Portable transguide systems and database searchers. A world where even doctors will once again make house calls electronically. That's if California's Pacific Bell gets its way. By providing a new network of fiber optics with coaxial cables, you'll be able to transmit all kinds of information. That includes sending your own EKG right to your doctor. Pacific Bell's Dan Dorensky.
She was able to converse with her doctor from her house, which is probably a far more comfortable setting for her, which means she might also get a more accurate reading of her medical situation. Also gives her doctor access to her on a far more timely basis and gives him the ability to interact with other hospitals to analyze the data. So you have, say, a doctor in a small town who has access to, say, Stanford University Medical Center.
Once the new network is built, it's just a matter of tapping into the hardware, and you won't be able to resist.
Just like when Gutenberg started printing books, that created a desire or a perceived need for people to learn to read. And then that expanded from the Bible to other types of books. And as you have the network in place, then who knows what you can put on it. It's, you know, limited to the imagination of the people who invent products and services.
But buyer beware. Experts say there's a product cycle that lasts about 18 months. And what's in today is out in a year or two. But those same experts agree it's worth the cost.
You will have access probably to more information than you'll ever know what to do with, but if there's something you want to know, you'll be able to find out.
You'll also find out that in the future, it's much easier to keep in touch.
We got a blaze, but first, I want to get, in on this debate here. Let me throw my weight around a little bit. See, they're debating Alien versus Predator. I say, let's just have an Alien versus Predator movie. No more Alien 4. How about some new ideas on film? Don't you agree with me, Stab?
Mike, I'd like to see Sigourney Weaver reprise her role as Ripley.
I'd like to see the Queen Alien as the star of her very own movie.
Like I said, the staff always agrees with the host of Sci-Fi Buzz. We'll see you next week. Who gets fired first? No. Oh, it's our Halloween show. Make sure you watch next week.
The mysteries of aliens, the magic of Houdini, the miracles of angels. Now the real stories, people, and events are explained in a thrilling new series, Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles, hosted by Patrick McNee. Coming up next.